The other day I posted on social media a little weird design I came up with for a device to hold up my onions in the deep water culture bed. So today I figured I would go over that in a little bit more detail and show you what that's all about. You would be surprised how time-consuming producing these videos can be. You can help support this channel by supporting us on Patreon or just subscribing and liking our channel. Every little bit helps. Thanks! Last year I grew a bunch of onions and they did really well, but as they got older, the greens would start to pull them out and the onions would roll and the roots would come out of the rafts. So basically from my high-tech simulation here, they would just roll over like that and then the roots would pull out. They would continue to grow, but I didn't like that and it just made a huge mess of everything. Here's a quick overview of what I came up with. I had a few main goals with this. First was to make it an independent support for each onion. I didn't want to have to build a big contraption like a grid over the entire setup. I wanted to be able to plant onions here and there and just have a little support bracket for each onion. I wanted to be able to use existing 1-inch or 2-inch rafts, just whatever I have in inventory. So I did go with the 2-inch rafts for the final design. Another thing is I wanted this to be adaptable to various raft thicknesses. I'm using 1-inch thick rafts, but I'll probably go to 1.5 or even 2-inch rafts because when you start loading 32 or 36 onions onto the rafts with a 1-inch, you may not get enough buoyancy out of that raft. So I wanted to make sure that this could work with different thicknesses. I didn't want to have to modify my existing rafts by drilling or punching extra holes into them for support brackets. It'd be easy enough just to make some type of a wire frame and just jam it into the raft and sort of like a tomato cage. I didn't want this to be a permanent installation. I want to take my rafts out, remove these supports, and then just throw them in a box somewhere and use the rafts for other things. They need to be fairly cheap. So if you're growing an onion that's worth 50 cents or $1, you don't want to have a very expensive apparatus holding these onions in place. So after many iterations of the design, this is what I came up with, where it's essentially a simple cage, and the greens come up through the top of it. And if they do tip over, once they get to a certain height, I don't care if they tip over and break, it's really just to support the lower section of the onion to keep it from rolling out. So let's zoom in on this and look at it in detail. So this is the half section view where we have this upper ring, the supports, and then the lower section. I'm going to turn off a couple of things here so we can look at it in a little bit more detail on how it functions. Now this is the 2-inch hole in here, and there's a mechanism in here, and essentially a cup that converts it down to a 1-inch hole. And within this cup there is a ring, I call it the onion ring, that actually can twist a little bit. And then I have these legs that teeter in here with the teeth on it. So what happens is as this ring gets twisted, it pushes the leg down and these teeth grab into the side of the raft. They don't do much damage to it. They do leave an imprint, but they really grab in really well. Take a look at it from a top view. As this ring turns, that wedge shape in there takes and pushes each leg out, and then there's an indent in the ring too, so it essentially snaps into place. So as the further in you go, it helps to keep that pressure against the raft and keeps the leg from pushing back out and popping that ring out of place. Each of the legs have this little snap assembly in it, so once you get it put into the raft, all you have to do is lower the ring in and it just snaps into place. My CAD system doesn't flex that out, but basically it goes in, snaps in, and then it's got this little thumb thing in that you can just pull on it and the ring will pop right out again. Here's all of our parts: the cup adapter, the ring that does all the magic with the leverage. Then there are 3 support legs, and of course the top hoop. Probably the trickiest part of this whole thing is to get this ring onto the cup. The ring actually has some little overhangs on it to keep it permanently attached to this cup once it's on there. So they have to bend out of place, and with the 3D printing, this is the one weak area where these can snap off. But I came up with a pretty good way to get this on fairly easily. Just force it on all the way, it stays on nice and even, and it's almost on there, and then just very carefully snap the rest of it into place. And now those are overhanging in and it won't come off, and you can see this just sort of turns a little bit like that. Each leg goes on fairly easily. There's a hook on the bottom which hooks into the bottom of the cup itself, and then at the top section there's this little tab which hits against the cup as it goes in, but if you bend the cup just a hair, it's enough to get it onto there. So now this is a nice mechanism and it keeps it from falling off. And that's the whole thing. So now you have this apparatus that just sort of flops around. This is one of my sample rafts I use for testing. This hole here is a standard 2-inch hole that most people just use a hole saw to cut them through, and you can see that it goes all the way through. All of my rafts, I had cut them on my CNC table and I used a tapered bit, so the hole saw doesn't actually go all the way through. So the top is at 2 inches, the bottom's a little less. So I wanted to make sure that these things fit in either my rafts or what most people have for standard rafts. You can see in here that all of my testing I've slowly impressed onto the raft. It hasn't ripped it apart or anything, but it does leave permanent marks over time. You know, I've done dozens of tests on this, so it would take quite a while for somebody else's raft to actually look this bad. But it still works even with these impressions, and the regular drilled hole looks okay too. So now all it takes is to drop that in, give the mechanism a little bit of a twist, and those grab right in. Now you can see that this is grabbing. And then the top hoop just sort of snaps into place. And you can see you can pull on the sides of this pretty hard and it does not want to come out. And of course, this will hold either a regular grow plug like that, or I use the grow grips with the onions and they fit in there too. And of course, to dismantle it, you can just take the ring off, undo that, and it pops right out. It's sort of hard to see from the underside, but as I twist the ring, that ramp built into the ring pushes those in and it grabs into the sides of the raft. Now to remove this out of the raft, you don't have to remove the ring. You can just leave the whole assembly together. You can just spring that out and you push the sides in a little bit. You can see they're sort of spring loaded, and this will just pop right out too. Spring is right around the corner. My onions have just come up and they are not quite ready to get transplanted into here yet. The only thing growing in the greenhouse right now are the strawberries, and they're just getting started. So we'll get these ready for action, but it's gonna be a little while. I also think these are gonna work well for growing my basil and probably the peppers too. They tend to get a little tippy, so I might try a few of those in here too. This raft will hold 32 plants. For something like the peppers and the basil, I'll do 18 or raft instead. But for onions, I think we should be good with this. And I'm gonna have to keep my printers going because I'm short on the number of holders that I have here by several. So I want to do a few hundred onions, so my printers are going to be busy for a while. I've originally thought this was one of my quirky ideas, but I actually think it's going to work out really well. I think I am going to put these on my e-store, so if you want to try them out, follow the link down in the description and it'll get you to the store, and maybe you could try these out. It helps to support the ever-going projects that I have here and motivates me to continue creating new ideas. Once again, I'd like to thank you for watching, and we'll see you soon.